They say that some wounds never heal, but I'm here to tell you that it's not true. My name is Margaret Thompson, and 26 years ago, I discovered something so devastating that it nearly destroyed everything I believed about love, trust, and family. The two people I loved most in this world betrayed me in the most unimaginable way possible. What happened next changed my life forever. And today, at 64 years old, I want to share with you how I found peace in the midst of the storm that nearly took everything from me. I'm sitting here in my small kitchen in East Texas, looking at an old photograph that I found yesterday while cleaning out my closet. It is faded now. The colors have dulled with time, but I can still see the smiles on our faces. There is me, my husband David, and my younger sister Linda at our family barbecue in 1998. We all look so happy, so content, so blissfully unaware of what was coming. If someone had told me that day that within months, these two people would shatter my world in ways I never thought possible, I would have laughed at them. But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? You see, I thought I had the perfect life. I was 38 years old, married to David for 18 wonderful years, and we had two beautiful children, Sarah and Michael. David was everything I had ever wanted in a husband. He was handsome, charming, hardworking, and he loved me deeply, or so I believed. We had built a life together in our small town of Millerville, Texas, where everyone knew everyone and family meant everything. My sister Linda, who was 8 years younger than me, was like a daughter to me. After our parents passed away when she was just 16, I had taken her in, helped her through school, and watched her grow into a beautiful young woman. The trust between Linda and me was absolute. She was more than my sister. She was my best friend, my confidant, the person I shared my deepest secrets with. When she moved to Austin for college, I missed her terribly, but I was so proud of her. She would visit us often, spending holidays and summers at our house, playing with the kids, helping me in the kitchen, and always bringing such joy and laughter into our home. But here is something I want you to understand, and I hope you'll stick with me through this story because I believe it might help you if you were going through something similar. Please, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and let me know if you've ever faced a situation that tested your faith and your ability to forgive. Your support means the world to me, and I truly believe that sharing our stories can help heal not just ourselves, but others who are walking similar paths. Looking back now, I can see the signs that I missed. David started working late more often, claiming he had extra projects at the construction company. He would get phone calls that made him step outside to talk, saying it was just work stuff. Linda's visits became more frequent, but she seemed different somehow, more distant, less open with me. There were moments when I would catch them looking at each other in a way that made me uncomfortable, but I pushed those thoughts away. How could I even think such a thing? These were the two people I trusted most in the world. I remember one evening in particular. It was a warm September night, and we were all sitting on the front porch after dinner. David was telling a story about something that happened at work, and Linda was laughing, but not at the story, at something else, something private between them. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, they had known each other for years, they were family, and it was natural for them to share jokes and memories. The children adored their Aunt Linda. Sarah, who was 15 at the time, would spend hours talking to her about boys and school and all the things that teenage girls talk about. Michael, who was 13, would follow Linda around like a puppy, asking her about college and life in the big city. They saw her as the cool aunt who understood them in ways that their boring old parents didn't. It breaks my heart now to think about how much they loved her, how much they trusted her, and how her actions would affect them too. Our marriage wasn't perfect. No marriage is, but I thought it was solid. David and I had our disagreements, sure, but we always worked through them. We had built a life together, raised our children together, weathered the storms of life together. We went to church every Sunday at Millerville Baptist Church, where David served as a deacon and I taught Sunday school. Our faith was the foundation of our relationship, or so I believed. We prayed together, we read the Bible together, and we tried to live according to God's word. I trusted David completely. When he said he was working late, I believed him. When he said he needed to help a friend or run an errand, I never questioned it. Trust was the bedrock of our marriage, and I had never had any reason to doubt him. He was a good father, a good husband, and a good man, or so I thought. The idea that he could be deceiving me, that he could be living a double life, never crossed my mind. And Linda, sweet Linda, she was like my own child. I had been there for her through everything. Her first heartbreak, her struggles in school, her fears about the future. I had sacrificed so much for her, given her everything I could, and she had always been grateful and loving in return. She would call me every week, telling me about her classes, her friends, her dreams. We would talk for hours, laughing and crying together, sharing our hopes and fears. The betrayal, when it came, was like a knife to the heart, but it was a knife wielded by the two people I loved most in the world. It didn't just hurt. It shattered everything I believed about love, trust, and family. It made me question everything I thought I knew about myself, about my judgment, about my worth as a woman and a wife. I remember the day it happened like it was yesterday. It was a cold Tuesday morning in November, and I was supposed to be in Dallas for a teaching conference. I had been working as a substitute teacher at the local elementary school, and the conference was important for my certification. But that morning, I woke up with a terrible headache and decided not to go. I called the school to let them know I wouldn't be able to make it, and then I went back to bed, hoping to sleep off the pain. Around noon, I was feeling better, so I decided to get up and maybe do some housework. The house was quiet, too quiet. David was supposed to be at work, and the kids were at school. I made myself a cup of coffee and was sitting at the kitchen table looking through some bills when I heard a noise from the living room. At first, I thought maybe it was the cat, but then I heard it again, and it sounded like voices. My heart started racing. We lived in a safe neighborhood, but you never know. I grabbed the baseball bat that David kept by the back door and slowly made my way toward the living room. The voices were getting clearer now, and I could hear laughter, soft and intimate. My blood ran cold as I recognized the voices. One was David S., and the other was Linda S. I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to move, unable to breathe. What were they doing here? David was supposed to be at work, and Linda was supposed to be in Austin at college. Why were they here together, and why did they sound so intimate? I crept closer to the living room door, and what I saw next will haunt me for the rest of my life. There, on the couch where we had spent countless evenings watching movies with the kids, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we had built our family memories, my husband and my sister were together in a way that made my stomach turn and my heart shatter into a million pieces. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't even notice me standing there. I watched in horror as the two people I loved most in the world destroyed everything I had ever believed about love, trust, and family. The scene was so surreal, so impossible, that for a moment I thought I must be dreaming, that this couldn't be real. But it was real. Devastatingly, heartbreakingly real. My husband of 18 years and my sister, my baby sister whom I had raised and loved and protected, were betraying me in the most profound way possible. The pain was indescribable. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out, leaving a gaping wound that would never heal. I must have made a sound because suddenly they saw me. The look on their faces was something I will never forget. Shock, guilt, fear, all mixed together in the expression of pure panic. David jumped up, trying to fix his clothes, stammering something about how it wasn't what it looked like, but we all knew that was a lie. Linda just sat there, tears streaming down her face, unable to look at me. The confrontation that followed was ugly and painful. There was screaming, crying, accusations flying back and forth. David tried to explain, to rationalize what had happened, but there was no explanation that could make this right. Linda kept apologizing, saying she never meant for it to happen, that she loved me and did not want to hurt me, but her words felt empty and meaningless. I learned that their affair had been going on for months. All those late nights that David was supposedly working, all those frequent visits from Linda, all those looks and private jokes that had made me uncomfortable, it had all been real. They had been carrying on right under my nose, in my own home, betraying not just me, but our entire family. The details of their betrayal were like salt in an open wound. They had been meeting in secret, talking on the phone when I wasn't around, making plans behind my back. David had been taking Linda to places that were special to us, sharing with her things that I thought were private between us. The intimacy that I thought belonged to our marriage had been cheapened and shared with another woman, and that woman was my own sister. I felt like such a fool. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted them so completely? All the signs had been there, but I had chosen to ignore them because I couldn't bear to believe that the people I loved most were capable of such betrayal. I blamed myself for being naive, for being too trusting, for not being a good enough wife to keep my husband faithful. The aftermath was devastating. Within hours, the entire town knew what had happened. In a small place like Millerville, gossip travels fast, and the story of David Thompson and Linda Morgan Yes affair was too juicy to keep secret. Everywhere I went, people stared at me with pity in their eyes, whispering behind their hands about the poor woman whose husband had run off with her own sister. The divorce proceedings were messy and public. David wanted to fight for custody of the children, but they were old enough to choose, and they chose to stay with me. They were angry and hurt and confused, unable to understand how their father could have done this to our family. Sarah, who had always been close to her Aunt Linda, felt especially betrayed. She had trusted Linda with her secrets, her fears, her dreams, and now she felt like everything had been a lie. Michael, who was always the more sensitive of my two children, blamed himself somehow, thinking that maybe if he had been a better son, his father wouldn't have left. I spent countless hours trying to reassure him that none of this was his fault, that sometimes adults make terrible choices that have nothing to do with their children. But the damage was done. The church community that had been such a source of strength and support for our family was now divided. Some people rallied around me, offering their prayers and support, but others seemed to blame me somehow, as if I had failed as a wife and that S.Y. David had strayed. The whispers and sideways glances were almost as painful as the original betrayal. I fell into a deep depression that lasted for months. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, when the pain was so overwhelming that I thought it might kill me. I had lost not just my husband, but my sister, my best friend, the person who had been like a daughter to me. The betrayal was double, and it cut twice as deep. Linda and David moved to Houston together, starting a new life while I was left to pick up the pieces of the old one. They tried to reach out a few times, to apologize, to explain, but I couldn't bear to hear from them. Their words felt hollow and meaningless. How do you apologize for destroying someone else's entire world? How do you explain betraying the trust of someone who loved you unconditionally? I was angry, angrier than I had ever been in my life. The rage consumed me, ate at me from the inside out. I was angry at David for throwing away our marriage, our family, our life together. I was angry at Linda for betraying the trust I had placed in her, for repaying my love and sacrifice with the ultimate betrayal. But most of all, I was angry at myself for being so stupid, so naive, so trusting. The anger was like a poison in my system, affecting every aspect of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate on anything. I was snapping at the children, pushing away friends who tried to help, isolating myself from everyone who cared about me. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone bitter and angry and broken. It was during this darkest period of my life that I began to question everything I had ever believed about God, about faith, about the meaning of life itself. How could a loving God allow such pain? How could he let good people suffer while those who caused the suffering seemed to go unpunished? I had been a faithful Christian all my life, but now I felt abandoned by God, forgotten and forsaken. I stopped going to church, stopped praying, stopped reading my Bible. When well-meaning friends would tell me that God had a plan, that everything happened for a reason, I wanted to scream at them. What possible reason could there be for such betrayal? What plan could justify the destruction of a family, the breaking of children's hearts, the shattering of trust and love? But even in my darkest moments, even when I felt most alone and abandoned, there was a small voice inside me that kept whispering that this wasn't the end of my story. I couldn't hear it clearly at first, couldn't understand what it was trying to tell me, but it was there, persistent and patient, waiting for me to be ready to listen. It would take time, a lot of time, before I would be ready to hear what that voice was trying to tell me. It would take years of pain and struggle and growth before I would understand that this devastating betrayal, this shattering of everything I thought I knew about life and love, was not the end of my story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one that would teach me things about forgiveness, about grace, about the true meaning of faith that I never could have learned any other way. But that realization was still far in the future. For now, I was just trying to survive, trying to hold my family together, trying to find a way to go on living in a world that had been turned upside down by the actions of the two people I had trusted most. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would ultimately lead me to a place of peace and understanding that I never thought possible. A journey that would change not just my life, but my understanding of what it truly means to love and forgive. The months following the discovery were the darkest of my life. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions that I couldn't control or understand. The pain was physical, like a constant ache in my chest that never went away. I would wake up in the morning and for just a moment, I would forget what had happened. And then reality would come crashing back down on me like a tidal wave, leaving me gasping for breath and struggling to find a reason to get out of bed. The house felt different now, tainted by the memory of what I had witnessed. Every room held reminders of their betrayal. The living room where I'd found them together, the kitchen where Linda had helped me cook countless family meals while secretly planning to destroy our family, the guest room where she had stayed during her visits, probably thinking about my husband while sleeping under my roof. I considered selling the house, moving away, starting fresh somewhere else. But the children needed stability, and I could not bear the thought of uprooting them from their friends in school on top of everything else they were dealing with. Sarah was struggling with her own anger and confusion. She had always looked up to her Aunt Linda, had seen her as someone to emulate and admire. Now she felt betrayed not just by her father, but by the woman she had trusted with her teenage secrets and dreams. She became withdrawn and angry, lashing out at me for things that weren't my fault, as if somehow I was responsible for the destruction of our family. Her grades started slipping, and she began hanging out with kids who weren't a good influence on her. Michael A.'s reaction was different, but equally heartbreaking. He became clingy and anxious, afraid that I might leave him too. He would have nightmares and wake up crying, asking me over and over again if I was going to abandon him like his father had. The sweet, confident boy I had raised was replaced by a fearful, insecure child who jumped at shadows and couldn't bear to be away from me for even a few hours. I tried to be strong for them, to hold our family together, but I was falling apart inside. I was seeing a counselor, Dr. Patricia Hernandez, who had been recommended by our family doctor. She was a kind woman who tried to help me work through my emotions, but I felt like I was just going through the motions. Nothing she said seemed to penetrate the wall of pain and anger that I had built around myself. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. David wanted joint custody of the children, but they were old enough to express their preferences, and they both chose to stay with me. They were angry at their father, felt betrayed and abandoned by him, and they didn't want to have anything to do with his new life with Linda. This should have made me happy, but instead it just made me sad for them. They were losing their father, and no matter how angry I was at David, I knew that losing a parent is devastating for a child. The financial aspect of the divorce was also stressful. David had been the primary breadwinner, and now I had to figure out how to support myself and 2 children on a substitute teacher's salary. I had to get a second job working evenings at a local diner, which meant I was exhausted most of the time and had even less energy to deal with my own emotional healing or to help my children through their pain. The people in our small town meant well, but their constant attention and pity became suffocating. Everywhere I went, people would stop me to ask how I was doing, to offer their condolences as if someone had died, to share their own opinions about what David and Linda had done. Some people were genuinely supportive, but others seemed to take a kind of perverse pleasure in the drama, treating our family tragedy like entertainment. The church community was particularly difficult to navigate. Pastor Williams and his wife had been wonderful, offering their support and prayers, but there were others in the congregation who seemed to judge me as if somehow I had failed as a wife and that's why David had strayed. There were whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, sideways glances during services, and well-meaning but hurtful comments about how I needed to examine my own role in the breakdown of my marriage. I stopped attending church regularly, which only made things worse. In a small southern town, not going to church is noticed, and it becomes another thing for people to talk about. But I couldn't bear to sit in those pews, surrounded by reminders of the life I had lost, listening to sermons about love and forgiveness when my heart was filled with rage and bitterness. The holidays were the worst. Thanksgiving came just a few weeks after the discovery, and for the first time in 20 years, we didn't have our traditional family gathering. Linda had always helped me cook the meal, had always been there to laugh and share stories and create memories with the children. Now she was gone, and the absence felt like a physical presence at our table. The kids tried to be cheerful, but I could see the sadness in their eyes, the recognition that our family would never be the same. Christmas was even harder. David had always been the one to put up the outside lights, to help me decorate the tree, to play Santa Claus on Christmas morning. Now it was just me, trying to create some semblance of normalcy for the children while dealing with my own grief and anger. I found myself crying in the storage room while looking for decorations, overwhelmed by memories of happier times when our family was whole. Linda tried to reach out several times during those first few months. She sent letters that I threw away without reading, left voicemails that I deleted without listening to, and even showed up at my door once, but I couldn't bear to see her. The sight of her face brought back all the pain and betrayal, and I slammed the door in her face without saying a word. I knew she was hurting too, that she had lost her sister and her family, but I could not find any sympathy for her pain. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. David also tried to maintain contact, ostensibly for the children's sake, but our interactions were cold and businesslike. He would call to talk to Sarah and Michael, and I would hand over the phone without a word. When he came to pick them up for his court-ordered visitation, I would disappear into another room, unable to look at him without feeling sick. The man I had loved for 18 years, the father of my children, had become a stranger to me, someone whose very presence was a reminder of my pain and humiliation. The worst part was the constant questions that plagued my mind. How long had they been planning this? How many times had they been together in my house, in my bed, while I was at work or running errands? Had they laughed about me, about how naive and trusting I was? Had Linda been pretending to care about me all those years? Or had she genuinely loved me before she decided to destroy me? I became obsessed with trying to understand how this had happened. I went through old phone bills, looking for evidence of their communication. I searched David's belongings for clues about their relationship. I drove past places where I thought they might have met, torturing myself with images of them together. This obsession was eating me alive, but I couldn't stop myself from picking at the wound, from trying to understand the incomprehensible. My friends tried to help, but I was becoming increasingly isolated and difficult to be around. My best friend, Janet Martinez, who had been my closest confidant for years, tried to get me to go out, to socialize, to find ways to move forward with my life. But I was stuck in my anger and pain, unable to see beyond the immediate hurt to any possibility of healing or happiness. It was Janet who first suggested that I might find comfort in returning to my faith. She had been a devout Catholic all her life, and she believed that God could help me through this difficult time. But I wasn't ready to hear that message. I was too angry at God, too hurt by the apparent injustice of what had happened to me. If God was supposed to be loving and protective, why had He allowed this to happen? If He was supposed to reward goodness and faithfulness, why was I being punished while David and Linda seemed to be happy in their new life together? I had grown up in a Christian home, had been baptized at 12, had attended church regularly for most of my adult life. I had taught Sunday school, had served on various church committees, had tried to live according to Christian principles. But now all of that seemed meaningless. Where was God when I needed Him most? Where was His protection, His comfort, His justice? The Bible that had once been a source of comfort and guidance now gathered dust on my nightstand. When I tried to read it, the words seemed hollow and meaningless. Verses about love and forgiveness felt like mockery in light of what I was experiencing. How could God expect me to love my enemies when my enemies were the people who had been closest to me? How could he expect me to forgive when the wound was still fresh and bleeding? Dr. Hernandez tried to help me work through my spiritual crisis, as well as my emotional trauma. She explained that anger was a normal part of the grieving process, that it was okay to be angry at God as long as I didn't stay stuck in that anger forever. She suggested that maybe this crisis could ultimately lead to a deeper, more authentic faith, but I couldn't see how that was possible. My faith had been shattered along with everything else in my life. Spring came and went, and then summer, and still I felt trapped in my pain and anger. The children were doing better, starting to heal and adjust to our new reality, but I seemed stuck in that moment of discovery, unable to move forward or find any peace. I was functioning, going through the motions of daily life, but I wasn't really living. I was just surviving, one day at a time, with no hope for anything better. It was during this time that I began to have what I can only describe as a spiritual awakening, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. I started having dreams, vivid dreams that felt more real than my waking life. In these dreams, I would see myself as a child, playing in my grandmother's garden, listening to her stories about faith and forgiveness. My grandmother had been a woman of deep faith, someone who had faced her own share of hardships, but had always maintained her belief in God's love and mercy. In one particularly vivid dream, I was sitting with my grandmother on her front porch, the same porch where she had told me stories about Jesus and his teachings when I was young. She looked at me with those kind, knowing eyes and said, "Margaret, honey, you're carrying a burden that's just too heavy for you to bear alone. You need to give it to God and let him carry it for you." I woke from that dream with tears streaming down my face, feeling like my grandmother had actually been there with me, offering her wisdom and comfort. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of something that might have been hope, though I quickly pushed it away. I wasn't ready to hope yet, wasn't ready to believe that there might be a way out of the darkness that had engulfed my life. But the dreams continued, and slowly, very slowly, I began to feel a stirring in my heart, a sense that maybe God hadn't abandoned me after all. Maybe he had been there all along, waiting for me to be ready to hear his voice, to accept his comfort, to open my heart to the possibility of healing. It would take time, a lot of time, before I would be ready to fully embrace that possibility. But the seed had been planted, and despite my best efforts to ignore it, it was beginning to grow. The first anniversary of the discovery came and went, and I realized that I had been living in a kind of suspended animation for an entire year. The children had moved on, had found ways to cope with their new reality, but I was still trapped in that moment of betrayal, still carrying the weight of my anger and pain like a stone in my chest. I knew that something had to change, that I couldn't continue living this way, but I didn't know how to begin the process of healing. It was then that Pastor Williams came to visit me. He had given me space, respecting my need to grieve and process what had happened, but now he felt called to reach out to me again. He sat in my living room, the same room where I had discovered the betrayal, and spoke to me about God's love and the possibility of redemption, not just for David and Linda, but for me as well. "Margaret," he said in his gentle, compassionate voice, "I know you re-hurting, and I know you re-angry. You have every right to feel that way. But I also know that God has a plan for your life, and this pain you're experiencing, as terrible as it is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a new chapter, one that can lead you to a deeper understanding of God's love and grace." His words stirred something in me, something that had been dormant for so long that I had almost forgotten it existed. For the first time in over a year, I felt a tiny spark of curiosity about what that new chapter might look like. I wasn't ready to embrace it yet, wasn't ready to let go of my anger and pain, but I was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there might be another way to live. That night, for the first time in months, I picked up my Bible and opened it to a random page. My eyes fell on a verse from the book of Matthew. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." As I read those words, I felt something shift inside me, a crack in the wall of anger and pain that I had built around my heart. I wasn't ready to surrender yet, wasn't ready to forgive, but I was beginning to understand that carrying this burden alone was destroying me, and that maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could help me carry it. The years that followed were a slow, gradual process of healing. I began attending church again, though irregularly at first. I started reading my Bible again, though the words sometimes still felt foreign and difficult to understand. I began praying again, though my prayers were often angry and full of questions rather than praise and gratitude. But slowly, very slowly, I began to feel God's presence in my life again, not as a distant, uncaring deity, but as a loving Father who was walking with me through the darkness. Sarah graduated from high school and went to college in Dallas. She had struggled through her teenage years, dealing with anger and trust issues, but she was beginning to find her way. Michael finished middle school and started high school. Still my sensitive boy, but growing stronger and more confident with each passing year. Watching my children heal and thrive despite everything they had been through gave me hope that maybe I could heal too. David and Linda had married and moved to Houston, where they started a new life together. They had tried to maintain contact with the children, but Sarah wanted nothing to do with them, and Michael only saw his father occasionally. The hurt was still too fresh, the betrayal too deep for easy reconciliation. I supported my children's choices, though part of me wondered if I was enabling their anger rather than helping them heal. I had started dating again, tentatively, and with great difficulty. Trust didn't come easily after what I had been through, and I found myself constantly looking for signs of deception or betrayal in every relationship. There was a kind man named Robert who worked at the bank, and we had gone out several times, but I couldn't bring myself to let him get too close. The walls I had built around my heart were still too high, too thick to allow anyone new to enter. It was during this time of slow healing that I began to understand something important about forgiveness. I had always thought that forgiveness was something you did for the other person, a gift you gave to someone who had wronged you. But as I studied the Bible and prayed and talked with Pastor Williams, I began to realize that forgiveness was actually something you did for yourself, a way of releasing the poison of anger and resentment that was eating away at your soul. The idea of forgiving David and Linda still seemed impossible, but I was beginning to understand that holding on to my anger was hurting me more than it was hurting them. They were living their lives, building their future together, while I was stuck in the past, unable to move forward because I was carrying the weight of my bitterness like a chain around my neck. One Sunday morning, about 3 years after the discovery, Pastor Williams preached a sermon about the parable of the unmerciful servant, the story Jesus told about a man who was forgiven a great debt but refused to forgive a smaller debt owed to him. As I listened to the sermon, I felt God speaking directly to my heart, challenging me to examine my own heart and my own need for forgiveness. We have all been forgiven much by God, Pastor Williams said, his voice gentle but firm. And because we have been forgiven much, we are called to forgive others, not because they deserve it, but because we have been shown mercy and grace, and we are called to extend that same mercy and grace to others. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I had been so focused on the wrong that had been done to me, on the pain and betrayal I had suffered, that I had forgotten about my own need for forgiveness, my own failures and shortcomings. I wasn't perfect, had never been perfect, and yet God had forgiven me time and time again. How could I accept God's forgiveness for myself while refusing to offer it to others? But even as I began to understand the importance of forgiveness intellectually, emotionally, I still wasn't ready. The hurt was still too deep, the betrayal too fresh in my memory. I prayed for the strength to forgive, but the prayer felt hollow, like words without meaning. I wanted to forgive, wanted to be free from the burden of anger and resentment, but I didn't know how to let go of the pain that had become such a part of my identity. Years passed. Sarah finished college and got married to a wonderful young man named Thomas. Michael graduated high school and went to Texas A&M to study engineering. My children were building their own lives, creating their own families, and I was proud of the resilient, compassionate people they had become, despite the trauma they had experienced. I had finally allowed myself to fall in love again, with a widowed man named Frank who attended our church. He was patient and kind, understanding of my past and the walls I had built around my heart. We had been together for 2 years, and he had recently asked me to marry him. I had said yes, though part of me was still afraid of trusting someone completely again. It was on a Tuesday morning in October, 26 years after that devastating discovery, that my phone rang and changed everything. I was in my kitchen, preparing breakfast and getting ready for my day, when the phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, so I almost didn't answer it. But something made me pick up the phone. "Hello, is this Margaret Thompson?" The voice on the other end was professional, clinical. "Yes, this is Margaret," I replied, wondering if this was a telemarketer or someone trying to sell me something. "Mrs. Thompson, my name is Dr. Patricia Collins, and I am calling from Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston. I am calling about your sister, Linda Morgan." My heart stopped. I had not heard Linda's name spoken aloud in years, and hearing it now brought back a flood of memories and emotions that I thought I had buried. "What about Linda?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm very sorry to have to tell you this, but your sister was involved in a serious car accident yesterday evening. She is in critical condition, and, well, the prognosis isn't that good. She's been asking for you specifically. She says she needs to talk to you before it acts too late." The words hit me like a physical blow. Linda was dying, and she wanted to see me. After 26 years of silence, after all the pain and betrayal and anger, she was reaching out to me in her final moments. I felt a swirl of emotions that I couldn't begin to sort out. Shock, fear, anger, sadness, and something else, something that might have been love. "What about David?" I asked, my voice shaking. Was he in the accident too?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I am sorry, Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Morgan did not survive the accident. He was pronounced dead at the scene. David was gone. The man I had loved for 18 years, the father of my children, was dead. Despite everything that had happened between us, despite the pain and betrayal, I felt a profound sadness at the news. He had been young, only 62 years old, and now he was gone forever." "Mrs. Thompson, are you still there?" Dr. Collins' voice brought me back to the present. "Yes, I am here," I said, trying to collect my thoughts. "You said Linda is asking for me?" "Yes, she has been very insistent. She says she has something important to tell you, something she needs to say before she passes. I know this must be very difficult for you, but would you consider coming to Houston? I don't think she has much time left." I stood in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I had just heard. Linda was dying and wanted to see me. David was dead. After 26 years of silence, of anger, of carrying the weight of their betrayal, I was being asked to face the woman who had helped destroy my life. My first instinct was to say no, to hang up the phone and pretend this call had never happened. I had built a new life, had found peace and happiness, had learned to trust and love again. Why should I open old wounds, subject myself to more pain, for the sake of someone who had shown me no mercy when she destroyed my family? But as I stood there, wrestling with these emotions, I heard that small voice again, the one that had been speaking to me for years, the one that had been guiding me slowly toward healing and forgiveness. This time, the voice was clearer, more insistent. "Go to her," it seemed to say. "This is your chance to find the peace you've been searching for." I thought about all the years I had spent carrying the weight of anger and resentment, all the energy I had expended on hatred and bitterness. I thought about the dreams I had had of my grandmother, about the sermons I had heard about forgiveness, about the slow, gradual healing that had been taking place in my heart. Maybe this was God's way of giving me the opportunity to finally let go of the past, to find the forgiveness that had eluded me for so long. "I'll be there," I heard myself saying, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "I'll leave as soon as I can." The drive to Houston took 4 hours. 4 hours of emotional turmoil and memories flooding back. I thought about the young woman Linda had been when she first came to live with David and me, so full of life and potential. I thought about the sister I had loved so much, the person I had trusted completely, the woman who had helped me raise my children and had been such an important part of our family. I thought about David too, about the man I had married, the father of my children, the person who had shared my bed and my dreams for 18 years. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pain and betrayal, I felt a deep sadness at his passing. He had been so young, had so much life left to live, and now he was gone. But mostly, I thought about forgiveness, about what it meant and what it would cost me. I had spent 26 years learning to live with the pain of betrayal, but I had never really learned to let it go. Now I was being given the chance to face that pain head on, to confront the person who had caused it, and to choose whether to continue carrying the burden of anger or to finally set it down. When I arrived at the hospital, I almost turned around and went home. The building was sterile and intimidating, and I felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was about to do. But something pushed me forward, some force stronger than my fear and anger, and I found myself walking through the doors and asking for Linda S. room. The nurse who directed me to the intensive care unit was kind and professional, but I could see the pity in her eyes. She had probably seen this scenario before. Family members rushing to the bedside of someone who was dying, trying to make peace before it was too late. Linda E.'s room was small and filled with medical equipment. The sound of machines beeping and whirring filled the air, and the smell of antiseptic was overwhelming. And there, in the bed, surrounded by tubes and wires, was my sister. She looked so small, so fragile, nothing like the vibrant young woman who had destroyed my life 26 years ago. Her hair was gray now, streaked with silver, and her face was lined with age and pain. But when she opened her eyes and saw me standing in the doorway, I saw the same green eyes that had looked at me with love and trust when she was young. "Margaret," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the machines. "You came." Artie, I walked slowly to her bedside, unsure of what to say or do. All the anger and resentment I had carried for so long seemed to evaporate in the face of her obvious pain and vulnerability. This wasn't T, the woman who had betrayed me. This was my little sister, the child I had raised and loved, and she was dying. "I am here," I said simply, pulling a chair up to her bedside and sitting down. Tears began to stream down her face, and she reached out with a trembling hand to touch mine. "I am so sorry, Margaret. I am so sorry for what I did to you, to your family, to your children. I've carried the guilt and shame of it for 26 years, and I need you to know how sorry I am." Her words opened a floodgate of emotions in me. All the pain and anger and betrayal came rushing back, but so did all the love I had once felt for her. I looked at this dying woman, this person who had been such an important part of my life, and I felt something shift inside me, something that had been frozen for 26 years beginning to thaw. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why did you do it? I loved you so much, Linda. I gave you everything I had. Why did you destroy our family?" She closed her eyes, and more tears leaked out from under her lids. "I don't know," she whispered. "I was young and stupid and selfish. I was flattered by David's attention, and I convinced myself that what we were doing wasn't really hurting anyone. I told myself that you would never find out, that we could keep it secret and no one would get hurt. I was so wrong, Margaret, so terribly, horribly wrong." She opened her eyes and looked at me with such pain and regret that it took my breath away. "I destroyed the best thing in my life," she continued. "I destroyed my relationship with you, with the children, with the family that had loved me and taken care of me. And for what? For a man who never loved me the way he loved you? For a relationship that was built on lies and betrayal?" I felt my own tears beginning to fall as I listened to her words. This was the conversation we should have had 26 years ago, the honest acknowledgement of the pain and damage that had been done. But we had both been too hurt, too angry, too proud to have this conversation then. "Did you ever love me?" I asked, the question that had tormented me for so long finally finding its way out. "Or was it all a lie?" "Oh, Margaret," she said, her voice full of anguish. "I loved you more than anyone in the world. You were my mother, my sister, my best friend, all rolled into one. You saved me when Mom and Dad died, gave me a home and a family and a future. Everything good in my life came from you, and I threw it all away for a moment of selfish pleasure." She paused, struggling to breathe, and I could see that speaking was taking everything out of her. "I know I have no right to ask this," she continued, But I need to know before I die. Can you ever forgive me? Not for my sake, but for your own. I can see the pain in your eyes, Margaret. I can see how much you've suffered because of what I did. Please don't carry that burden anymore. Please forgive me so you can be free. In that moment, sitting beside my dying sister, Asped, I faced the choice that had been before me for 26 years. I could hold on to my anger and resentment, could refuse to forgive and carry the weight of betrayal with me for the rest of my life. Or I could choose to let go, to release the pain and anger that had been poisoning my heart for so long. I thought about all the sermons I had heard about forgiveness, all the Bible verses about loving your enemies and turning the other cheek. I thought about Jesus on the cross, asking God to forgive those who had crucified him. I thought about my grandmother's words in my dreams, about the peace that comes from laying down burdens that are too heavy to carry. And I thought about the woman lying before me, my little sister who had made terrible mistakes, but who had also been loved and cherished by me for so many years. She was dying, and soon she would face God and answer for her actions. But I was still alive, still had time to choose how I wanted to live the rest of my life. I forgive you, Linda, I said, my voice strong and clear despite my tears. I forgive you for everything. I forgive you for the betrayal, for the pain, for the destruction of our family. And I forgive David too, wherever he is now. I choose to let go of the anger and resentment I've been carrying. I choose to forgive. The moment those words left my mouth, I felt something incredible happen. It was as if a weight that I had been carrying for 26 years suddenly lifted from my shoulders. The anger and bitterness that had been eating away at my heart for so long simply evaporated, replaced by a sense of peace and freedom that I had never thought possible. Linda's face transformed when she heard my words. The pain and anguish were replaced by a look of profound relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing my hand with what little strength she had left. "Thank you for giving me this gift. I can die in peace now, knowing that I've been forgiven." We talked for hours that day, sharing memories of our childhood, talking about the good times we had shared before everything went wrong. She told me about her life with David, about the guilt and shame she had carried, about the marriage that had never been happy because it was built on a foundation of betrayal and lies. She told me about the times she had wanted to reach out to me, to try to make amends, but had been too afraid of my anger and rejection. She told me about the children she had never had, about the family she had lost when she chose to destroy ours. And she told me how much she had missed me, how much she had regretted the choices she had made. 3 days later, Linda passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was there with her, holding her hand when she took her last breath. And as I watched her slip away, I felt not anger or satisfaction, but a profound sadness for all the years we had lost, all the love and laughter and family moments that had been destroyed by her choices. But I also felt something else, a deep, abiding peace that came from knowing that I had chosen forgiveness over revenge, love over hatred, grace over judgment. I had been given the opportunity to heal not just my relationship with Linda, but my relationship with God and with myself. The funeral was small and simple. Linda had few friends in Houston, and David's family had never accepted her. But I was there, along with Sarah and Michael, who had chosen to come, despite their own complex feelings about their Aunt's passing. We stood together at the graveside, not just as survivors of betrayal, but as a family that had chosen to forgive and to heal. In the months that followed, I found myself transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The anger and resentment that had been such a part of my identity for so long were gone, replaced by a sense of freedom and peace that permeated every aspect of my life. I was able to love Frank more fully, to trust more completely, to open my heart in ways that had been impossible when it was weighed down by bitterness. My relationship with my children deepened as well. Seeing me choose forgiveness over revenge, grace over judgment, helped them to begin their own healing process. They were able to remember the good times with their father, to grieve his loss properly, and to begin to forgive him for the pain he had caused them. I began sharing my story with other women who had experienced betrayal and hurt, helping them to understand that forgiveness was not about excusing the actions of those who had hurt them, but about freeing themselves from the prison of anger and resentment. I spoke at church groups, at women's retreats, at counseling centers, always with the same message. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength. It is not about the other person, it is about your own freedom and healing. Today, as I sit in my kitchen, looking at that old photograph that started this whole journey of remembrance, I am filled with gratitude for the path that God led me on. It was not an easy path, filled with pain and struggle and hard choices, but it was a path that led me to a place of peace and understanding that I never thought possible. I learned that forgiveness is not a one-time event, but a daily choice. There are still moments when the old anger tries to surface, when I remember the pain of betrayal and feel the temptation to hold on to resentment. But I have learned to recognize those moments and to choose again, every time, to forgive. I learned that forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing the actions that caused pain. David and Linda's betrayal was real, and the damage they did to our family was profound. But forgiveness means choosing not to let those actions continue to cause pain in the present moment. It means releasing the past so that you can live fully in the present. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness is a gift we give to ourselves. When I forgave David and Linda, I was not doing them a favor. I was setting myself free from the prison of anger and resentment that had been holding me captive for 26 years. I was choosing life over death, love over hatred, peace over turmoil. If you are listening to this story and you are carrying the weight of betrayal or hurt or anger, I want you to know that there is hope. There is a path to healing, to peace, to freedom from the burden you are carrying. It may not be easy, and it may not happen quickly, but it is possible. God can heal even the deepest wounds, can bring beauty from ashes, can turn mourning into dancing. Forgiveness is not about the other person deserving it. It is about you deserving to be free. You deserve to live without the poison of anger eating away at your heart. You deserve to love and trust and hope again. You deserve to find peace in the midst of the storm. 26 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought that the betrayal of my husband and sister had destroyed everything good in my life. But I was wrong. That betrayal was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that taught me about the power of forgiveness, the strength that comes from choosing love over hatred, and the peace that passes all understanding. My name is Margaret Thompson, and this is my story of how I learned to forgive the unforgivable and found freedom in the process. If my story has touched your heart, if it has given you hope or encouraged you to consider forgiveness in your own life, then the pain I went through was worth it. Because sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest sources of strength, and our deepest sorrows become our most profound joys. God bless you, and may you find the peace and healing that can only come through the miracle of forgiveness.